The morning had started out like any other for Dr. William Carter. He had retired only a year earlier from his long career as a family doctor in Tacoma, Washington. After decades of caring for others, he now had time to enjoy the peaceful beauty of nature. Hiking had become his favorite hobby, and Mount Rainier National Park was one of his favorite places. That summer morning, he packed his hiking gear, filled his water bottle, and scribbled a quick note to his wife, telling her he'd be back by nightfall. With his blue backpack and signature green jacket, he drove off in his silver SUV, leaving behind the quiet suburb and heading straight for the mountains. He had done this trail before, one that circled through the eastern side of Mount Rainier, not too difficult, not too remote. But this time, something was different. He never returned. When William didn't come home that evening, his wife Susan didn't panic at first. She thought maybe he had stopped for dinner or taken a detour. But by midnight, her worry turned into fear. She called his phone several times, but it went straight to voicemail. By sunrise, she had reported him missing to the park rangers. A search party was quickly put together, and for days, helicopters scanned the mountains while dogs and rescue workers searched every trail and ridge. They found his car parked at the entrance of a trail, but there was no sign of him along the marked paths. The weather had been mild, and William was a careful hiker. He always carried supplies, a GPS device, and even a flare. But no trace of him was found. No broken branches, no torn clothing, not even a footprint. As the days turned into weeks, the search efforts began to shrink. Volunteers stopped coming, and official crews had other duties. Still, Susan couldn't give up. She hung posters in nearby towns, posted on social media, and even hired private trackers. They too came back empty-handed. Some people started to whisper strange theories. Had he faked his disappearance? Had he fallen into an unseen ravine? Or had something more mysterious happened? Local news covered his story now and then, but slowly attention faded. For years passed. Susan tried to move forward, though her heart never healed. William had vanished into thin air, it seemed. No answers, no peace. She kept his hiking shoes by the door, just in case he ever walked back through it. Then one spring morning, a pair of wildlife researchers working deep inside Mount Rainier National Park were observing beaver behavior near a stream. They had been following a family of beavers for weeks and were recording how the animals built their large dam across the water. As they stepped closer to inspect the structure, one of them spotted something odd tangled inside the sticks and branches. It was a gray backpack covered in mud and moss, clearly worn by time. Thinking it might belong to a lost hiker, they pulled it out carefully. As they brushed off the dirt, they noticed a faded red D on the front, a marking Susan had mentioned many times in her missing posters. It was William Carter's backpack. After 4 years of silence, the first clue had finally surfaced, and it had been hidden in a beaver dam all along. The discovery of the backpack sent shockwaves through both the park authorities and William Carter's family. When the researchers handed it over to the rangers, the item was carefully examined. Inside the backpack were a few soggy granola wrappers, a crushed metal water bottle, and a folded map of Mount Rainier's eastern trail system. The map had been marked with a red pen, circling an area that was off the main path, a spot few hikers ventured into. But perhaps most chilling was the small, half-destroyed journal tucked in a side pocket. The first few pages were too damaged to read, but deeper inside, some entries were still legible. One page read, "Took a wrong turn trying to find the ridge again. GPS isn't working. Might have to camp here overnight." Another entry said, "Hurt my ankle. Can't climb back up. Trying to stay calm." The handwriting looked rushed and shaky. There were no more entries after that. Susan wept when she held the backpack in her hands. It was a painful reminder of the hope she had carried for years, and now it brought new questions. Where had William gone? Why hadn't anyone found this area before? What had happened to him after that final journal entry? The rangers decided to revisit the area near the stream where the beaver dam had been found. Guided by the journal and map, they planned a more focused search of the off-trail location. The terrain was difficult, thick with trees, uneven ground, and no clear path. The further they went, The clearer it became why no one had stumbled upon the place earlier. It was hidden by nature itself. After several hours, they reached a narrow ridge overlooking a steep drop into a wooded valley. That's when one of the searchers noticed something strange down below. With binoculars, he spotted what looked like fabric tangled in a tree branch near the base of the valley. The team marked the location and hiked down cautiously. As they moved closer, their hearts raced. It was a torn piece of green jacket material, similar to the one William had worn the day he disappeared. Nearby, stuck between rocks and roots, they found a hiking boot, mud-covered and worn but intact. It was as if nature had swallowed every trace of him, keeping it hidden for years. The searchers continued their sweep of the area, but they didn't find a body. No bones, no full set of remains, just scattered evidence that someone had once passed through, possibly injured and lost. The dense forest had clearly kept its secrets well. One ranger remarked that the forest might never give up everything. But even this partial discovery felt like a breakthrough. They marked the site for future examination and alerted forensic experts who could analyze the items more closely. Susan, though heartbroken again, was also relieved. She finally had a clue that told her William hadn't run away or abandoned his life. He had tried to survive. And somewhere in those wild woods, something had gone terribly wrong. Back in town, the news spread quickly. Locals who had followed the case from the beginning felt a deep mix of sadness and curiosity. Theories began swirling again. Had William simply fallen? Had animals scattered the remains? Or had he encountered something or someone out there in the forest that no one knew about? The fact that the backpack had ended up inside a beaver dam only deepened the mystery. Experts explained that beavers often collect anything they find near water to build their homes, and the backpack may have floated downstream or been left close to the stream bed before being pulled into the dam. Still, for Susan and those who loved William, this strange twist was hard to accept. How could something like this go unnoticed for 4 years? And if the backpack had been found now, what else might be waiting to be uncovered in those silent woods? As the investigation continued, the search team made plans to explore the surrounding forest more thoroughly. They brought in special equipment, drones with thermal imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and experts in wilderness survival patterns. The area near the stream where the beaver dam had hidden William's backpack was mapped in sections. Every rock, tree, and fallen branch was checked carefully. It was slow work, but no one wanted to rush. What had once seemed like an ordinary hiking trail now felt like a place with secrets. One afternoon, as a pair of searchers moved through a thicket, they spotted something strange buried under a cluster of moss-covered logs. It was a metal object, darkened by age and dirt. They dug it out slowly. It was William's GPS unit, cracked and no longer working, but still recognizable. This small piece of gear confirmed that William had indeed wandered far off course. The unit was later examined by technicians who managed to retrieve some of the location data. The final signal had come from the very same valley where the green jacket and boot had been found. It was the last known moment before the device had shut off. The more they uncovered, the more it seemed that William had gotten lost in an area not meant for hikers. Perhaps he had tried to find a shortcut or follow an animal path and had ended up deep in the forest, where cell signals and clear trails disappeared. Susan was called back to the park by officials to visit the area personally. She stood quietly at the site, looking at the thick trees and uneven ground. For the first time in 4 years, she felt close to her husband again. She imagined him here, tired but determined, trying to find a way back. A small memorial was placed at the edge of the valley, a wooden post with his name and the words "always loved, never forgotten." Susan laid down a photo of the two of them on their last vacation together, and for the first time, she allowed herself to cry openly. As the days passed, forensic teams returned to the spot and began taking soil samples, scanning for remains, and searching for any more personal items. They didn't find a full body, but small bone fragments were discovered near a fallen tree trunk, along with scraps of fabric and a broken pair of glasses. These items were collected and sent to a lab for testing. DNA results came back a few weeks later, there was a match. The remains belonged to William Carter. It wasn't the ending Susan had hoped for, but at least now she knew the truth. William hadn't suffered some unknown fate. He had been injured, stranded, and most likely passed away due to the elements. There were no signs of foul play, no marks suggesting an attack. Nature, as beautiful as it was, could also be cruel. The vast wilderness had become his final resting place. After the announcement, news stations across the state ran the story. Backpack in Beaver Dam leads to missing hikers' remains, the headlines read. People were stunned that something as small as a backpack could break open a case that had been cold for long years. Hikers and outdoor lovers began sharing the story on social media, reminding others to always stay on the trail and bring backup tools. Park officials updated their safety guidelines and even placed a new sign at the trailhead in William's honor, reminding people to prepare wisely and never hike alone. Though William's life had ended in a tragic and unexpected way, his story had become a lesson to many. And for Susan, knowing what happened, even through tears, was better than never knowing at all. In the months following the discovery, Susan found herself reflecting on the years she had spent searching, hoping, and imagining every possible outcome. The pain of losing William had never truly left her, but having answers brought a kind of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. She began sorting through his old things, his books, hiking journals, and the many letters he had written to her over their marriage. Each one reminded her of the man he was: kind, thoughtful, adventurous, and deeply committed to helping others. Friends and neighbors came by to offer their condolences again, this time with a sense of finality. The uncertainty that had hovered over William's disappearance had always made it difficult to grieve properly. But now there was room to mourn, to honor, and slowly to heal. Susan decided to write a letter to the two researchers who had found the backpack. In it, she expressed her deep gratitude, saying they had given her something priceless, not just the backpack, but the truth. She thanked them for stopping to investigate the strange sight in the Beaver Dam, for taking the time to report it, and for treating William's belongings with care. They responded warmly, touched by her words, and said they had no idea that a simple day of research would lead to such an important discovery. One of them admitted they had almost walked past the dam, thinking it was nothing more than an ordinary pile of sticks. It reminded Susan how often small things, ones that seem meaningless, can carry the most weight. As time went on, Susan began working with a local hiking group to raise awareness about trail safety. She shared William's story at community events, in schools, and with park visitor centers. Her message was clear: the wilderness is beautiful, but it must be respected. She told people to always carry emergency beacons, to hike with partners, and to tell someone exactly where they were going. She even helped fund the installation of an emergency signal tower near the trail William had taken. Every time someone used it to call for help, she thought of William and how proud he would be of her efforts. The park rangers, too, felt the impact of the story. Many of them had searched for William in the early days and still remembered his case. Now they spoke of it during orientation sessions for new rangers, using it as a reminder that no case is ever truly closed until answers are found. But perhaps the most moving part of the story came one quiet evening, almost a year after the final discovery. Susan returned to Mount Rainier not as a grieving wife, but as someone who had come full circle. She stood at the same trailhead where William had started his last journey, holding a small jar containing some of the soil from the valley where he was found. She walked a short distance up the trail and placed the jar beneath a tree. Then she sat on a rock and looked out at the mountains. The air was cool and clear. Birds sang above her, and the tall trees swayed gently in the wind. In that moment, she didn't feel alone. She felt connected to William, to the forest, and to the many people who had walked beside her through this long and painful road. The story of Dr. William Carter had begun with a man who loved the outdoors and ended with a reminder that even when someone disappears, love never does. What had started as a missing persons case had turned into something much deeper, a tale of devotion, of nature's mysteries, and of how even a beaver dam can hold the key to a family's closure. Though William's life had ended far from home, His legacy had reached countless others, guiding them to stay safe and cherish every step. And in the quiet heart of Mount Rainier, his spirit now rested, surrounded by the very wilderness he loved so much.